Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Morrison. I'm an organization development consultant with the OSU Extension Learning and Organizational Development Unit. So thank you all for joining us today, continuing our extension reporting and VITA boot camp kind of series this short holiday week. So we appreciate you all joining us today. We have a couple of our good partners and colleagues, FCS educators. We have Treva Williams and Melinda Hill joining us. We'll kick off today with some writing goals and objectives, and then close it out with some developing curricula. So I think Treva is going to kick us off here with goals and objectives. So Treva, you can take it away. Let me know if your screen share is, I think you still have access.
That work?
Yep, we got it.
Awesome. All right. Well, good afternoon. I am really pleased to be able to join you to do this session on goals. I won't say that I'm an expert at it. I will say I've had lots of experience at it. I serve as the area leader for Area 23 down in very southern Ohio. And then I also serve as a family consumer science educator. So today what we're going to do, let me make sure I got here we go. So today our objectives, we're really going to try to do three things in our short period of time. One is we want to really talk about what's the difference between a performance goal and a professional development goal. Because oftentimes those kind of get blended. Sometimes it's hard to determine, is it really a professional development goal or is it more of a performance goal? But then the piece I want to spend the most time on is really talking about what are SMART goals. And we hear that acronym, but we're going to dive a little deeper into that and kind of talk about how does that play out for us in extension and in our work. And then the final thing we're going to talk about is just briefly about where to enter those goals, because that sometimes is a challenge to find. If you're like me, it's kind of like, okay, now I know they're there somewhere, now where do they go? So the first thing we're going to talk about are the performance goals. And so performance goals are those things that are really kind of, they're the goals we have basically on how we're doing our job. And so they're really going to focus on what I tend to call three of our big areas. They're going to focus on our programs. So it may be a big program that we're trying to get started. It may be something that we're working on that we've decided, oh, I want to expand this and I want to make it different. Or it could be on our teaching. One of our goals may be that we're going to teach, could be to even a new audience, or to a group we haven't worked with before. And it could also focus on our scholarly works. So for some of us, that may mean that part of one of our performance goals may be that we're going to submit proposals to 2 professional association meetings. Now you say, no, wait a minute, is that a performance goal or is that a professional development goal? If I go to the meeting, that's professional development. Well, that's where they kind of blend sometimes. And so you may have a professional development goal and a performance goal that kind of overlap in some ways, but they still should have very specific pieces. So when I'm talking about submitting a proposal, and to actually do a presentation, that's really a performance goal versus a professional development. So these are really about what we call those big rocks. That's why we only set 3 to 7 of these performance goals. We don't put down everything. You know, if one of my goals is going to be, you know, I've got, let's say, advisory meetings. And so, you know, one of my goals, if you say, well, one of my goals is I'm going to have 7 advisory meetings with my advisory group. Well, is that really a big rock in our programming? Or is that just part of what we just do because those are already on our calendar? So goals need to be meant to stretch you a little bit. And so I think about it, I'm going to go back one slide just a second. I noticed up here in the corner, I put my target with my arrows. And I think about goals as being what I'm aiming for. Now, if you're like me, every time I shoot at a target, I don't always hit the bullseye. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I may be a little bit off, or I may be a whole lot off, depending on what that goal might be. But if I don't know what that goal is, I'm certainly never going to hit it. So that's where when we think about performance goals, we think about those things that are going to shove us a little bit. They're not just what we typically do every day in our job. So as I mentioned before, I think about a performance goal from a perspective of something, even if you were thinking about a program you've done a lot. So let's say if you're a 4-H educator and you've done Real Money, Real World, and you decide you want to offer that to a different school. Maybe it's a school you've had trouble getting into, or a school that you really don't have a good relationship to even know where to begin with that. Adding that school can be a big rock, because it's not just you're going to schedule and go in and teach it. You have to build some relationships in order to be able to then conduct that goal of offering that program. So 3 to 7 performance goals are our target. Some people want to set a whole bunch of goals. Remember, these are the big things. These are not your typical pieces of your everyday job. If we even know what our everyday job is today, I'm not sure I do, because my goals have changed some this year. So the next type of goal we have, and both of these are in our VITA document, is our professional development goals. So professional development goals really focus on what is our plan for learning, or our plan for development. And so this is where we think about those things where we have to learn something in order then to be able to implement it. So I'll give you an example I did many, many years ago for myself. Was I had a goal that dealt with becoming a facilitator. I had done lots of some trainings locally, some in-house trainings in state, but then I knew I needed to build my skills, because I was teaching a lot of facilitation process, but people were wanting facilitation tools. So as my professional development goal, I researched and I found that there was this really good conference offered by Michigan State University, and they focused for 3 days. That's all they did, was they taught about facilitation. They taught the tools. So myself and another educator decided, hey, we're going to try this. So that was a huge goal for us, because not only did we want to go to the training, we needed then to take that training we got and implement it. And I think for educators, that's the challenge. When we do professional development, it's not that I just go learn something. Yeah, we all learn different things, but what do you do with it? So what's your plan for implementing after you have learned whatever that task may be? It could be on a specific topic. It could be for our support staff. It could be a specific program. So LOD's offered a lot of trainings this year for us in regards to a lot of our computer programs, where we can learn about how to do different types of programs that we may not have used before. So maybe you've not used Qualtrics. Maybe you've always had somebody else set it up, but now you're going to decide, okay, I want to tackle that. So you go through, and one of your goals would be to participate in the trainings, but then what are you going to do? Well, then using what you learned, you would implement that to either set up a survey, set up an evaluation, set up a registration form, whatever it might be in that regard. So we're going to link what we've learned to what we need to learn in order to do our work. I could take lots of professional development, but if it doesn't really have anything to do with my job, we're really wasting our resources. We're wasting our finances. We're wasting our time. that could clearly be spent on something that would be more beneficial to our programs. How many of these do we do? Well, there's less of these than there are of our performance goals. So performance goals were 3 to 7. Professional development goals are going to be 2 to 4. And then we need to think about what are some of the considerations we need to think about. So as you think about professional development goals, think about things such as, what are the finances? What finances do you have available to do trainings? You know, one of my goals may be to go to this conference, but it's really expensive. And that may not be a really good goal for right now because I may not have money to do it. The university right now is not letting us do those. So, you know, we have to think about what are those things that would help us. Sometimes we may have taken on a new stewardship role. And you may say, wow, you know what? I have no background in this topic at all. So maybe I need to learn more about budget development, or maybe I need to learn more about all of the IT pieces and how to manage those. Yeah, that's a huge goal for us, isn't it? So think about those considerations. Sometimes we may have some skills, but we may want to just hone them or make them a little stronger. So one of the things that we need to do when we do goals, and remember, I always go back to my arrow, okay? Think about what we're aiming for. So when we do SMART goals, there are some things that we need to make sure our goals state, because one of the things is they need to be very specific. If I just say, I'm going to go to a national conference, how does your supervisor measure that? They don't know which conference you're planning to go to. They don't have any idea when it is. They don't have any idea what you're planning to learn. If you're using that as a professional development goal, what are you trying to learn at that conference that you're going to bring back that's going to improve your work? Because remember, this is a work-related event. So they need to be specific. They need to be measurable. This particular graphic says achievable. Achievable and applicable both, okay? They need to be realistic and relevant, and they need to be time-bound. So thinking about those things as we think about a goal, thinking about measurable. Measurable means, oh, there's a way to actually tell if I hit the goal or not. So if you're doing a program, maybe one of your goals is going to be that you're going to take and say, we're going to have not necessarily a number of people there, but how many people are going to learn something? Because, oh my goodness, now when I go to report that, that's one of those magic questions it asks, isn't it? How many people learned something? So make my measurable goal say 80% or 90% of people are going to learn something. And then what about how many of them are actually going to plan to use what I share with them? So that's another way that we can make a goal very easily measurable, but then at the same time, we're going to be able to report that information also when we complete, when we enter that info into VITA. So it has to be some way we're going to measure, and not just measuring the number of people there. Measuring people tells us what our contacts are, but that doesn't really tell us our true impact. And goals are meant to help us measure our impact. Another thing then under the A was the achievable or applicable. So does this really, first of all, is it related to what I do? If I want to go take a class on basket weaving, sorry, Debbie, I know you do those, but basket weaving is not something that really pertains to my job other than maybe it provides me stress relief. But is that something that's going to be truly applicable to my job, applicable to what I need to do? Is it going to be achievable? Can I do it? We also need to think about relevant. Is it relevant to where I am in my job? Is it relevant to my position? Is it relevant to the task I'm being asked to do? Is it realistic? And then the time bound. This is one we tend to always want to leave off because, well, what happens if I don't hit my goal? If I say I'm going to do this by April and it doesn't happen until November, well, then my supervisor will say I didn't meet my goal. So we're always hesitant to put that time on there. But that time-bound piece really helps keep us focused on the goal. Now, sometimes I'm going to tell you, and I'll tell you again toward the end, goals can change. They can be modified because life happens. So let's think about these again. I'm going to give you some examples. Now, these are some I pulled off websites. Some are some I've written, so don't judge too closely. But I think that they kind of give us some guidance. So this is to be a sample performance goal. So this one was under communication was to enhance quality, readability, and accuracy of an online newsletter content. Okay, and I'm not going to read down through all of that, but I think thinking about this, we go through, we want to say that there's some timeline to this. So obviously, if this was something we were doing newsletters, we want people to be able to better understand them. Are these very specific goals? We're talking about quality, we're talking about readability, we're talking about accuracy. Those can be measured. We've got a timeline. So you have March 15th, we're going to prepare the March 5th newsletter by February 15th. We're going to ask a certain person to review it, provide feedback. Then we're going to launch the newsletter by March 1. So there's a very specific timeline. The one down at the lower part talks about a program that we do with a juvenile court program. So it's a compassionate action program. It's going to be during the spring of 2019. Now remember, these were made back in January. The exact dates weren't set, but we knew it was going to be spring, not fall. Who are we targeting? We're going to then talk about a minimum number of people and then some measurable goals regarding people learning new information and then making a change or planning to make a change. Very measurable, very relevant to the position, in this case as an FCS educator. So thinking about these are some examples. There are some links on the websites we can give you to show some. There's a whole lot of other examples. Some professional development goals would be, this would be an example of someone, particularly if you were a educator or a support staff or educator. So complete training on reading and reconciling e-reports and travel by March. So if those were new tasks that you had for a new support staff member or for a stewardship role, here's some ways to make that measurable. Develop mentoring skills. By February 1, you're going to read a specific book by a specific author, prepare a list of ideas that you could share that you can apply with your employees. Again, measurable. And then the final one talks about to attend professional development programs outside the office within the calendar year, targeting specific competencies, specific things you need to improve on. Maybe your supervisor said, oh, well, you really need to, hey, maybe they told you you need to work on writing goals. And so you saw this as an opportunity. So this could have been a goal for you for this year. So where are these put? Basically, this is put in the same section. You would have above this would be your the programs where you enter all your programs in your teaching. Come down below that, you would have your specializations. And then underneath that are goals. So we're going to enter professional development goals and performance goals in the same location. What does it look like? This is the screen. Notice you check performance or professional development. You've put the year You can order the goals. So sometimes I want one goal to be a little higher than others because I think it's a little more important that I do that one. Or it has more value, I think, to me. So I may place that as a higher numbered goal. We put the goal, and then don't forget the critical piece when it comes to reporting is the progress on goals. Make sure we get that reported. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about just briefly is some goals are going to take longer to reach than others. So if you have one of those great big huge goals, it's okay to state the whole goal and then break it down into what pieces am I going to accomplish in 2020? What am I going to accomplish next year? Sometimes life happens. I can speak from personal experience. When my husband was very, very ill and then passed away, that year, my goals got all shot out of the water. They didn't happen like I planned. And that's part of life. But we adjust that and we do what we can and we report what we can. We don't just say, nope, didn't happen. And I think that's really important to report even if you're unable to reach the goal. I had some employees last year who would report it didn't happen, but they didn't tell me what they did different. What did they do? Did they put something else in the place of it? Was something else that became more important? Some of you may have had a goal. I had one educator I know had a goal to do a program at a camp in April of this year. Rather than just saying it didn't happen, tell me why it didn't happen. And what are your plans to be able to actually implement it maybe a different way? And then talk with your supervisor when you're setting goals. We don't set them in isolation. We set them together. So I'm going to stop my sharing. Hopefully, I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But do you want to open for questions at the very end, Jared? Let Melinda go ahead, or?
Yeah, I think we will. I think I see Melinda on here. I think it might be by phone, but thank you very much, Treva. Appreciate you going through that. And I mean, this is a topic that I've even heard a lot, but still got a couple good nuggets from you there. So thanks so much. And Melinda.
Tried to pare it down a little. So.
Yeah, that's good. Is Melinda on here?
I am, Jared, but I am by phone without computer access at the moment. So if you can work on my slides, that would be great.
Sounds good. Let me pull those up here. Let's see, is that all showing up for you all? A red slide right now? Okay, perfect. All right, Melinda, take it away.
Well, I just appreciate everyone's grace. Sometimes things just don't exactly turn out the way they are planned. And yeah. So today we're talking a little bit about the curriculum and program development. And I know when I first started with this organization, there were lots of opportunities and I didn't know exactly how to get started. So I hope as we proceed along through here today, you'll have a little better snapshot. It's definitely not something that I think we can cover with the breadth and depth maybe that we would be thinking, but I hope that it gives us the high points that I can refer back to and then be able to accomplish as we continue in the career. So if we can go to the next one, please. I'm just, those are just the initial objectives. And so hopefully if I haven't covered those at the end, you can bring them back to my attention. And the next. So the question that I would ask for all of us today is, what are you teaching and why are you teaching them? Some of the things that we are doing may be according to our expertise. Some of them may be because that's what the clientele in the community are requesting of us. Some of it may be because, gee, somebody in the county next to me thought this would be a really cool thing, or somebody in my office thought this would be a topic that we could all work on. And that's what we want to build a stronger team, and we each take a component and move forward. But just because we're actually teaching those doesn't mean that it becomes part of a total curriculum development. And Jared, you're going to have to help me if there are questions in chat or if there's anything on here that I'm not seeing. Okay, please?
Sure. Yep. Will do.
Thank you. So when we talk about our program development, Treva was talking about our goals and some of the things that we need to put on our Vita. But that is what is, whether we're FCS, CD, Ag, or 4-H, that becomes part of what our program looks like within our county or the clientele that we're serving. Our curriculum development is really things that maybe something near and dear to us, that we have experience with, that we have an expert, maybe it was one of those conferences that we attended and we had some really in-depth training that I feel like I can take and expand upon. But when I use the word curriculum, we're going to start by looking at just some of the things that we do and then how that affects us throughout our career. Does that make sense to everyone? Thank you. So this is a slide that there's a lot on here, but I'd like for you to print it off, put it above your workstation, look at it from the standpoint of how do I take some of the things that I do on a regular basis and turn that into things that can be expanded upon, added to, and focused so that it becomes part of a curriculum. And towards the end of our time today, I'd like to be able to share with you all of the components of a curriculum. But for right now, we want to look at this and say, okay, so what am I going to plan? What does this really look like? How can I, how can I expand upon it with that design? What does this really look like? What kind of learners am I attracting? Do I have both visual, auditory, kinesthetic? Do I have all of them or components within the lesson that would appeal to all kinds of learners? How am I going to implement this? I think all of us are being challenged right now to implement our teaching on many different levels. And so how do I change? How do I adapt? What does this look like? And then that measure, that evaluation, that's a very important component. And it's not just the numbers, it's the so what. Because we participated in this, how is it going to make a difference down the road? And you'll notice that this is just a continuum, essentially, that goes both ways, because I may get to a certain point and have to really revisit or identify something that is others have pointed out that I might have missed. So just keep this one in mind as we go forward. I hope we don't leave here today thinking this is really too complex. Because if we do a little forethought and do some planning, I think we can identify the fact that I may be able to take bits and pieces because they don't fit exactly what I need in my county, but there's this piece, and then I can add from my own experience or my own professional development, and it can essentially I'm tweaking it to be able to adapt it to fit the needs in my community. So the comment that Eric liked to say when he and I were teaching this is start with the things that you do every day. Start with the things that you are most familiar with, you are most confident in, and have that breadth and depth of subject matter that makes it fairly easy to be able to understand and move forward. Okay. So this is a chart that we look at to say that planning model that I showed you earlier. Well, this is one that I can look at and be able to have a little deeper or a little more clear understanding. So you'll see there to the left-hand side, it talks about our everyday work, the program implementation. It's the stuff that we do. So one of the things that I'm very familiar with is food preservation. So early in my career, it was something that I both enjoyed doing and I wanted to learn more about. So it was one of the stuff things that I could add to. I became involved with the state team. I began going to more classes, more workshops, doing a lot of reading, writing fact sheets that you had to do research to be able to understand the hows and the whys. And then I was able to take many of those, what we'll call one-time programs, and there were several of them. So, okay, it's almost June. We're going to have berries approaching in the season. So jams and jellies would be a popular topic. So then our canning fruits, our peaches and pears will follow. And then we'll go into canning vegetables. And so you take all of those individual programs and be able to look at it and package it together to have a total curriculum. Now, something I think is really important that we think about is that this doesn't always have to be done individually. If there's a way to be able to work with a group of people that I am guessing many of you have identified who you can work really well with. I tend to be a big picture thinker. So I need to have people on my team that are very detail oriented, that are going to call me back and say, okay, but what about this and this format, and let's make sure that it all matches, and those logistics that make the details really important. So then as you move across this continuum, as I start with just the stuff that I'm doing now, eventually I can end up, if it's a completed package that can be peer reviewed. Does that make sense to everyone? I see it. I see your head nodding, Jared. So are we good?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Some thumbs up.
All right. I apologize. Trying to do this from a phone is not fun. So let's talk a little bit about selecting the curriculum that we might be either looking at to adapt within our own counties. I could be looking at it to as part of a resource package for me to be able to use. I would like to encourage us all that if we go on to the next slide, please, Jared, and the one after that. So we're looking at this to say creating is not our first step. It's not the first point that I should stop and just decide, oh, today I'm going to write a curriculum. I should be thinking about, okay, so what are the needs in my community? What is already out there? Is this a common topic that other people are already teaching? And if the answer to that is yes, then I don't really need to spend my time and effort rewriting something and just repackaging it just for the sake of writing curriculum. But it is something that I think causes us to ponder and to think about what is already out there. And at that point, then I'm going to start to look at some of the core values. We work for a land-grant university. It is our job to be able to share the unbiased, research-based information. That's what makes us unique, especially right now in this time when there's so much information out there. So how am I going to take that information from any of the national, the trusted sites, the research base, and be able to package them in a way that my community clientele can truly benefit from them. There's just a list on that slide that talks about where I can go to look at some of this. Back to the conferences that Treva was talking about earlier, our national meetings. What am I going to really learn about or strengthen my specialization or strengthen my knowledge base in? Can I participate in meetings outside of extension? Are there subject matter conferences where I can really, can I say, hone in some of my expertise? There's always the 4-H books and bulletins. As I said, we're just blessed to be part of not only Ohio State University, but part of the land-grant system nationwide. And there's lots and lots of information out there. So we just have to do our due diligence, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So I mentioned a few minutes ago when we talked about working together as a team, that we look at this, if you can find groups, sometimes small groups, sometimes larger groups, and I can break it down into subdivision, subtasks that each group can work on tasks, and then we can pull things together rather quickly. If we make this as a team goal, then we become accountable. Then it's something that we can say to our supervisor, to our state leader, here's what we've been able to accomplish with the information that we have at this point in time. We can fine-tune our own expertise. I think that's the piece, for me, one of the joys in working for this university is the ongoing education. You learn something new every day. And the more you learn, the more you know there is to learn. And so how do I take this vast amount of information, put it into a concept that's easy for me to both teach, but to put it into a package that others then can pick up and share. And that's the true, one of the true goals of having a curriculum. So, and it also helps with our reporting and our impact. So as we work together in these teams, try and remember to keep some of those concepts in mind. So our next slide talks also a little bit more about just some of those experienced educators that may be out there. There's a lot of already developed programs. And maybe it's something that you really don't have a deep passion for, but your community is really asking for it. And so not spending all of your time to develop something, but being able to spend that information and teach it once and then go on and come back and focus your time with the subject matters that you really want to learn more about. I think we all learn from one another. How to teach, how to present, how to evaluate, how to summarize, how to report. So the more I work with others, then the stronger an educator I become. And thus the stronger writer and developer I am when I am working on many of these curriculum pieces. There at the bottom where it talks about the reciprocation that comes back to you, don't feel like we always have to do the teaching in our own communities. Sometimes, and food preservation is probably a fairly good topic. If you're not comfortable with that, there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of things that are really important to get right. So if I was not comfortable with that topic, I'm going to invite somebody to come into my county and teach that. And then hopefully I can go to their county and teach something that they may not be familiar or comfortable with. So that builds not only your confidence, but it builds the vita, it builds the evaluation component. So there's just lots of advantages in looking and pairing off with our peers in that way. So I mentioned getting more mileage out of their materials and to benefit from some of their viewpoints. And I think I just said that one. So let's go on to the next one. Thank you. Now, I hope that there's been a few things that we've talked about that you say, I've never really thought about that particular lesson or that particular topic. But, you know, if I would take that information and look at it from the standpoint of packaging it from the stuff that I am doing right now, what do I need to look at to get it to that in package? So that's where we're going to focus on here for a few minutes. So the next one talks about making curriculum a priority. I really need to do some looking out there to see what is already available. I don't want just to spend time to spend time. It needs to be something that I'm going to be able to show impact and share on a broader basis as time allows and as opportunity allows. I do want us to look at the materials, and I want to eventually be known as an educator who does their due diligence, that really does dig in. And when I put things together, whether it's a lesson or a fact sheet or putting things together as part of a team, that I am that I do things accurately, that I do them correctly, that there's not pieces missing, that I've really taken the time to make sure that everything is here so that somebody else could pick up this package, this curriculum, and be able to do their reading, do their background, have the background knowledge, but everything else is there. And we'll cover that here in just a minute. Okay. So I love Eric Barrett. Many of you are familiar with him, and he does a great job of talking about start with sharing it in mind. In other words, just because I may have a pretty good handle on pressure canning with vegetables or meat, that doesn't mean that everyone that I'm going to share this with has that same kind of background knowledge. So I need to anticipate some of the questions. I need to anticipate a step-by-step process and make sure that all of those details are written down. So if I begin with that sharing in mind, then I am better set. I don't have to go back and undo maybe some of the things that somebody that doesn't have the same kind of knowledge wouldn't feel comfortable in sharing. The notes are so important. Then when they have questions, if they should read through it, then they're going to pick up the phone and call me and say, Melinda, all right, you said that you need to make sure that you vent the canner. Can you go through that process with me so that I make sure I can understand and I can fully explain that, because I know that's a really important part of pressure canning. So I am helping my peer by understanding that, and I am learning, okay, I didn't put that maybe in writing as well as I could have, so how can I redo or restate that? One of the questions I think we can ask ourselves, many of you may have been on the job for a few years now, and you can say, whose material can I just find it really easy to pick up and follow? I can easily read through their notes. I know the PowerPoint's not going to have any misspelled words on it. I know there's going to be references cited with it. I know that it's going to be just ready to go. And when I have taught it, I'm going to be excited about reaching out to them and saying, you know what? I taught this lesson. This is how it was received. Here's some of the evaluation. Thanks. If there's ever a time that I can reciprocate, or if there's ever information that I can share, let's be sure and partner on this for the future. It's an ultimate way of being able to becoming a team player and a team builder. Now, I probably should have put this lit review back up before the sharing piece, because this is a piece that again, Eric is very, very strong in urging us all to do. So it's one thing to reach out and say, okay, what kind of lessons are already out there? What do we know that somebody is teaching? But what does the research truly say? And sometimes, especially in family and consumer sciences, that's a little hard to find. It's soft science, it's soft research. For ag and natural resources and pesticide and fertilizer, you know, it's not that way. There's lots of studies out there that I can refer back to and make sure that I have accurate data going forward. But whatever my topic is, whatever it is that I'm working on, I need to do as best I can in finding out from the literature, from the research, what is out there and how can I implement that? How can I incorporate that in some of the lessons that I am trying to teach? So those proven impacts, and then how am I going to, this would be a really good place to say, if there's things that I can't find, then maybe that's the gap I need to fill. Maybe that's the piece of curriculum that I need to research and write a little further. I am sure any of our peers, especially those that are on the faculty track, have probably done a little bit better job of doing literature reviews for writing journal articles. Reach out to any of them, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to be able to help guide this process should you have any additional questions. So I see we're close in time. I do want to leave a few minutes for questions. But here's the couple of things that I want us to remember when we're talking about our individual lessons and then what a curriculum package really looks like. So first of all, I do need to have a title on there. What is it that I'm talking about? Who developed it and what year? I'm pretty sure we could all go to some of our either archives or just filing systems, and you're going to find materials in there that don't have years, and we don't know who wrote it. And maybe then I question whether or not this is up to date enough for me to be able to use. What is the overall need and the objectives? Who are my target audience? Can I adapt it to any audience? Absolutely. But you have to know what audience it's really written for before I can expand and change some of the presentation that I might be doing. The total curriculum description. What does this entail? What's the goals? What are, after participating in this lesson, what is the outcome that you hope to achieve? What is my role? You know, on Vita, it asks, what's your percent contribution? Well, if you're on a team of 20, your contribution is going to be much smaller than if you're on a team of 5. So really think about that and make sure that everyone talks ahead of time before everyone fills out their Vita to make sure that your role is accurate and accountable when and if it should be checked on. So the use by others, that's a wonderful piece that I was talking earlier on that team. When you use somebody else's curriculum, make sure you shoot them an email and let them know. Ask the questions. Do you have any tips that you want to share with me before I teach this? Any of those could be very helpful. Then as we begin to take those individual lesson plans, then we have the typical components of what a curriculum package really looks like. So it's going to have lesson plans along with a table of contents, and most often it's going to be a series of lessons. Could be 3, 4, 10, 20. It just depends on the topic and how much information there is to cover. It's going to have some of the background materials, some of the things that for individuals that this is not their area of expertise, or the content that they're very familiar with. So here are some basic facts, basic foundational information that you need to be aware of before you would teach this. Then as we go through, what are the instructions? Do you need any special equipment? Do you need any special visuals to be able to share? Again, back to food preservation, we take the different types of canners, we take jars, we take ring bands, we take the lids, we take recipes. All of those pieces help to reinforce the individual lessons that we are trying to teach. Do you think about where you're teaching? Sometimes you may not have access to internet. You may not have access to, or teaching from an electronic standpoint is probably not the way that is best served. So I can take that and just look at it from the standpoint of how am I making this easy for my peers to be able to pick up, read through, and then teach from this. And then finally, we have the marketing materials, a brochure, something that is easy for them to be able to drop their individual county information, their name and address into, and then that evaluation tool. Ideally, if it could be something that is set from across the state, that we can gather statewide data on, then it's a stronger tool to be able to use all across the board. So in closing here, I just like to say, work smarter, not harder. Do a little work on the front end so that you're not having to go back and rethink or redo things as you are planning ahead for your future. I too apologize. That was a lot of information, but I would love to try and answer any questions that you might have.
And thank you, Melinda. And I apologize. I don't think I followed you along your slides there, the last couple. So I apologize to everyone, but we will make the slide decks available on the LOD webpage, along with the recording links that we'll post, so that you'll have access to those typical components that Melinda ran through. So you'll have those for you. Melinda, we have one question in the chat and someone else that said they have a question. Teresa, you mentioned that you have a question first. If you're still here, do you want to speak aloud or?
Yes, thank you. This is the first time in 24 years that it's been clearly explained to me that I actually do have curriculum. I guess the mindset in 4-H is that if it's not research-based, it's not curriculum. So I've missed the boat. I all the time package stuff, but I thought that since it wasn't my original thought, which I don't think I have any original thoughts left, that it wasn't curriculum. You know, it's just for like officer training. I'm all the time taking what I like, what works, what doesn't. And so I thought that I couldn't package that as curriculum because it's plagiarizing or stealing or borrowing. I mean, how do you give credit and that mindset? I think a lot of 4-H people have that mindset.
And so I may need to have a little help here from my cohorts, but when I look at the literature review, when I look at where the gaps are, so you're right, if I'm just taking, I live in Wayne County, so if I'm taking Wayne County's officer training and I'm just adding an activity to it, that might not be true curriculum for me to be able to move ahead. I would encourage you to really talk with your state program leader and some of your state specialists to talk about what's the peer review process. Because quite honestly, I think I missed or skipped over that on one of the slides. Before this can become curriculum for me to package and move on, it needs to go through a peer review process. We need to use the Turnitin and make sure that we're not plagiarizing or we're not using that information that somebody else has compiled and put forth. I can use that as a reference to be able to be a springboard to go on to the next level of something deeper, something that others haven't thought of, something that I do in a manner in which seems to really connect with the kids, and yet nobody else has put that in writing. So that peer review process is essential in being able to move it forward as a total curriculum. Does that help, Teresa?
Yes, that was the piece I was missing. And I think that's the piece that we just run out of steam on.
Well, and that's why I say working in teams and working with your state leader. Find out what the process is. And Jared, do you have any other insight to share on that piece?
I do not right now, to be honest. So I don't want to speak
Okay.
out of turn.
Well, it is my hope, and I'll own this, that not too many years down the road that we would have a process that would be more equitable in all program areas. And so everyone would know what that process is. I may have just added something to my to-do list, Jared, but I think it's an important piece for the organization as a whole.
And I think that's probably on the radar. So Treva just wrote the peer review of curriculum is coordinated through the AD for each program area. And so, yes, I guess that is true. And I agree with you that having something a little more standard across the board might. Thanks, everyone. So yes, having something a little more standard across the board would probably be a goal and be helpful. We have one more question at least posted in the chat. I think Melissa is still on here, yes. And so this was, I think, geared more towards Melinda, but anyone's welcome to jump in. So Melissa wrote, is there a model or template for peer review in preparation for curriculum development and sharing? So I think, Melinda, you may have got through some of that towards the tail end of your presentation. And then the second part of her question was, is there a model for storing, sharing, and finding the curriculum in each area?
Oh, those are deep questions. I think I can say, at least in FCS, when we work through our 3 healthies, so the state specialist, that is the person who would help us work through that peer review process. I am really sorry for the other programs. I don't know how their peer review process works. And so that could be something to put on the radar for down the road. This is probably, it is something that we're concerned about and need to pay attention to, and make sure that maybe not in the initial onboarding, but down the road, that we understand what that process is in all program areas. And then to talk about where the curriculum is essentially housed or stored. Again, in FCS, many times it's on the website, and that is managed by the 3 healthy state specialists. So I would encourage reach out to your state staff. I know that this is a really busy time for them, but at least they might be able to give some direction. And if you have a mentor, this is a great conversation to be able to work with them on. Where do you find it? Who has it? And how might I go about using it to be able to reach the audience in my community? Treva, any other thoughts?
I think you pretty well covered that. It's very different from program area to program area. The only other thing I would add is sometimes reach out to other states. Also, don't always think we have to just look in-house in Ohio. Oftentimes there are curriculum developed with other states that we can take and adapt, and they're oftentimes very willing to share.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Melinda, I know you can't see it, but I just posted in the chat box the link to the policy and procedures handbook for extension on the review process for OSU extension educational materials. I thought that might, yeah, you started talking about that toward the end.
Yes,
and it's got the process for Turnitin and all the other stuff that you were talking about.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that.
All right, so I think that's got through all the previously posted questions. Since we're a little bit after 2 p.m., I'm going to propose to kind of cut off the formal presentation. So thank you all so much for joining us. Very big thank you to Treva Williams and Melinda Hill for leading these sections today. I do want to put a little plug in for our session tomorrow at 1 p.m. and Friday at 1 p.m. We'll be talking about VITA more specifically. So Thursday, tomorrow, we'll be talking about VITA for the extension department, and Friday at 1 p.m. VITA with the for elements data. So it's kind of 2-part VITA dive there. So please come back and learn more about VITA. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate your grace.
Thanks,
Melinda. Thanks, Treva.